Beneath a frozen mountain, where machines of power hunt and shadows whisper, a man discovers dragons that were once human, creations of a ruthless company that now seeks to erase them forever. But in the clash of memory and fire, a single choice will decide whether hope survives or vanishes into silence. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, let's jump into the story. The wind curled across the frozen plain like a living thing, and he listened, because silence had never saved anyone. Dr. Arlen Cade kept walking, one careful step after another, counting in his head, because numbers felt honest, even when memories did not. It had been 97 days since he slipped out of the Neurodyne complex. 97 days of white horizons, thin food, and that sharp fear that his mind might belong more to the corporation than to himself. This was a hostile world, a frozen wasteland left behind after the thermal wars. But rumors said something survived out here. Arlen carried proof on a weatherproof pad, pressed tight against his chest. His thermal wristband argued with reality, flickering between 2 degrees and below 0, as if the cold itself were a debate. The blizzard narrowed vision to a tunnel of moving snow. The strap of the wristband cut into his skin, but the device still spoke in its dry voice. Vitals irregular. Recommend shelter within 23 minutes. He had rewritten its beacon to broadcast fake vital loops, a small trick to hide from trackers that hunted by biosignature. Even so, he knew they were searching. A company like Neurodyne never lost interest in stolen research. The ground shivered under his boots. At first, he thought it was distant ice cracking, but the pulse repeated in a rhythm too smooth for geology and too warm for machines. Something alive was moving beneath the crust of snow. Arlen stopped, scanning the white, one gloved hand resting on the old energy pistol in his coat. He had only 2 charges left. Those charges were for last choices, not first reactions. His implant gave a tiny tick, a static hello that he did not write. Someone had touched the back door he could never fully lock. Corporate code felt like that. Polite, precise, and not at all concerned with his consent. He tasted fear like iron on his tongue. The ridge ahead stood 30 meters away, a low promise of rock and windbreak. He could run for it and hope, or he could hold still and learn something that might keep him alive longer than stone could. The snow shifted in a darker wave. A narrow head lifted from the drift, scales glinting like wet stone beneath thin light. Yellow eyes fixed on him. The creature came up to his hip, long-bodied and lean, with folded wings pressed tight to its back. It opened its mouth, and only steam. Yet here it was, steady and curious, watching a human who was trying to choose the right second to move. Arlen's trained mind ran through possible answers: engineered hybrid, chimeric splice, convergent evolution. Each phrase felt too small next to those eyes. The creature tilted its head, left, then right, as if comparing his shape to a memory. A distant howl slid through the storm. Tracker hounds, the kind that followed scent and sound through white noise and bad weather. The creature snapped its head toward the howl, then back to Arlen, then toward the ridge. The gesture was clear. If you want to live, come now. He lifted the pistol and lowered it again. His instincts chose the same thing his curiosity wanted. He followed. The entrance to the ridge was a black seam in ice-polished rock. The creature pressed through sideways. Arlen copied the motion, scraping pack and pride on stone. The chamber beyond opened into still air and muffled sound. The storm's voice dropped to a memory with small teeth. The temperature rose from lethal to merely cruel. His wristband softened its tone. Biosignatures stable. No pursuit detected. He peeled off a snow-stiff coat, kept the thermal suit zipped, and watched the creature pace a slow arc that measured him as much as the room. Up close, it was smaller than it had seemed outside, more length than bulk, perhaps the weight of a large dog, but with a reptile's balance. The wings twitched like a thought too bright to hold still. The scales shifted from slate gray to sea green where light caught them. Arlen knelt, palms open. "You helped me," he said, voice soft from disuse. "Thank you." He took out the weatherproof pad and opened a directory marked Ladder Project. Within the redacted files lay a captured image stamped with an old date code. The same eyes, the same pattern of scales, a designation that read L-7-31. A note in clinical language called the subject Live Unit Meta-Adaptee, Luma. The shorthand read like a word wanting to be a name. "Luma," he murmured, tasting it. The creature blinked once, slow, as if accepting the sound. Luma reached out with a careful foreclaw and tapped the screen. Pupils widened at the reflection. Self-recognition in a non-human host did not fit any conservative dataset. Arlen's chest tightened with a mix of awe and dread. The pad chimed as he opened a linked personnel stub. Fragments only. Research assistant. Cortical mapping. Reported lost after lab incident. The kind of neat sentence that corporations used when they wanted facts to go quiet. A scratch sounded, steady and patient. Luma dragged a claw across a smooth patch of cave wall, scoring letters with awkward care. N-A-R-I. Arlen read it aloud. Nari. Luma closed her eyes once and opened them again. She added 2 more words, each stroke cautious and true. Was me. The message landed like a stone in still water. Nari was me. You were a person, the truth filling the air in front of his mouth until he almost saw it. And they moved you. He touched the base of his skull where the implant sat, a small, hard coin under the skin. They want to move me. The ground hummed with a deeper sound, not the living pulse from before. This was geometry, a drill-eating rock, patient and certain. His wristband flashed. Multiple signatures at 1,200 meters, vector converging. The hunters had found their rhythm. Luma jerked her head toward the back of the chamber. Arlen grabbed his pack and followed through a narrow throat of stone into a wide room that breathed heat and light. The cavern held servers stacked like frozen waves, cables running like roots into deeper dark, and cryo-tanks that fogged their own names. Figures moved at the edges, more winged bodies in different sizes, eyes bright with the same unsettling focus. A rust-scaled dragon padded forward with a tablet in its teeth and dropped it at Arlen's boots. The screen woke with a text field. The dragon typed slowly with 2 claws. Welcome, Arlen Cade. "You know me," he said, half question, half confession. "We remember more than they planned." The next line read, "A slimmer dragon, with silver flecks along its spine, stepped closer," and added, "I was Nico Hale. Kept doors. Now I open them." Arlen's breath trembled. "How many?" 27, typed the rust dragon. The number filled the air like a quiet choir. They were not monsters. They were a stolen team. A memo surfaced on the tablet with a familiar corporate header. The words came even and cold. Phase 3, stable. Consciousness transfer maintains 78% human cognition. Loyalty programming effective. Subject CADE mapping complete. Process pending. Arlen felt the implant's weight as if it had grown heavier in an instant. The program had measured him, mapped him, and written his future without asking. The drill thudded closer. Dust snowed from the ceiling. Luma stepped beside him, warm and real. Arlen looked at the faces, scales and eyes and courage, and found his voice. "Show me your files. Show me your tools. If there's a way to separate minds from host bodies without harm, I'll find the crack." The tablet flashed one more line before the cavern surged into movement. "We hold time. You make freedom. Beneath the..." It was another to step into this underground refuge and see dozens of such beings at once. Their scales shimmered in varied hues: rust, silver, emerald, and night black, each pair of eyes following him with measured intent. He realized with sharp clarity that this was no random gathering of monsters. This was a community, built in secret, far from the eyes of Neurodyne. The rust-scaled dragon lowered the tablet once again. Words scrolled across the screen with deliberate care. "Welcome to the sanctuary." Arlen swallowed hard, his voice rasping. "How many of you are here?" The tablet clattered lightly as claws tapped again. 27. The number landed heavier than the mountain above them. 27 human minds, stolen and placed into scaled forms against their will. He remembered the corporate memo glimpsed on the tablet earlier. Clinical phrases like consciousness transfer and loyalty programming. It was one thing to suspect the cruelty of Neurodyne, another to stand among its victims. A silver-marked dragon stepped closer, its long body gliding more than walking. It tapped the tablet. "I was Nico Hale. Security Division." Dismissed, then erased. Another, emerald scaled with fractured horns, leaned in to type. "I was Dr. Mara Tess, Linguistics. Spoke 10 languages. Now I speak with claws." The cavern seemed to close in as each introduction pressed against Arlen's mind. They were people, colleagues, researchers, workers, each one declared lost by accident or circumstance, when in truth they had been remade as part of an experiment. "Why dragons?" Arlen asked, forcing the words into the stillness. Luma padded forward, brushing her scaled shoulder against his arm like an anchor. She tilted her head toward the servers, then tapped the tablet herself. Chosen form, survival, fire, flight, endurance. Myth turned biology. Arlen felt the implant. "What did they plan for me?" The silver dragon typed slowly, carefully. "You are mapped, complete. They wait to move you." The truth fell like an avalanche inside his chest. Neurodyne had already harvested his neural patterns, recorded the blueprint of his mind. If captured, they would not need permission. They would place him into whatever body they had prepared. The cavern trembled faintly. Dust drifted from above. The rust dragon tapped fast on the screen. They dig. Hunters close. Fear sparked, but Luma pressed forward. Her claws danced over the interface of an abandoned console, bringing up schematics Arlen recognized, consciousness transfer protocols. The documents filled the screen with diagrams, formulas, and brutal annotations. "You want me to study this?" Arlen asked. Luma tapped twice, her eyes steady. He skimmed the lines of data, his old training rising through panic. Neural pathways mapped, consciousness displaced, host brain partially retained for survival functions. It was both brilliant and monstrous. The design had been made to appear seamless, but Arlen knew science well enough to spot flaws. Deep inside the code, he saw tension, a battle between human cognition and reptilian instinct. "This is why your loyalty programming failed," he murmured. "The dragon brain rejects control." Mara Tess typed on the tablet. "Can you undo it? Free us?" Arlen hesitated. "I don't know if it's possible to reverse, but maybe I can separate the mapped consciousness from the host body without killing either." The chamber stirred with hope. Wings twitched, tails shifted, claws scraped stone. The silver one, Nico Hale, typed again. "Need more than hope. Need action. They come." The cavern shook harder this time. From somewhere deep in the tunnels, the sound of distant drilling and "Then, we don't have much time. Show me everything. Give me all their files, every stolen piece of data. If there's a way to build a countermeasure, I'll find it." Servers hummed louder as the dragons activated hidden systems, feeding him research logs and encrypted memos. A flood of stolen science poured across the screens, more than he could process in one glance. But he kept moving, eyes sharp, hands trembling, only when he allowed them to. Luma pressed close, her gaze steady on him. She tapped the tablet once more. "We hold them off. You break the chain." The cavern filled with the sound of claws against stone as the others prepared, wings stretching, tails lashing. The mountain itself seemed to pulse with their resolve. Arlen looked from face to face, seeing the shimmer of scales, but the weight of human determination inside them. They were no longer only survivors. They were a resistance, bound together by memory and choice. Dust raining from the ceiling. The time for questions had ended. Arlen tightened his grip on the console. Then let's give Neurodyne something they never planned for. The dragons roared low, a chorus of defiance echoing against the cavern walls, while Arlen Cade bent over the glowing screens, racing against the mountain's heartbeat and the approach of shadows that had hunted him for 97 days. In the room under the mountain, survival became a pact, and the first spark of rebellion burned. The tavern was alive with tension, every scale glinting in the pale blue glow of servers, every sound magnified by the weight of the mountain pressing down from above. Arlen Cade sat hunched over the console, eyes fixed on streams of encrypted code that scrolled like endless rivers of light. His hands trembled, but his mind burned with clarity. If there was any chance to undo what Neurodyne had built, it lived here, in the patterns, in the fragile spaces between human memory and engineered instinct. Luma stayed close, her yellow eyes steady, as though her presence alone could hold him together. The dragons moved in the shadows, preparing defenses. But they watched him, too. They knew the battle ahead wasn't just one of claw and fire. It was a war of ideas, and Arlen's mind was their only weapon, sharp enough to cut through the chains of control. The floor quivered again. Faint rumbles carried through the stone. The hunters were almost through. Their machines tore at the tunnels like teeth on bone. Nico, the silver-scaled former guard, dragged a crude map of the cavern to Arlen's side. He tapped a claw against it. 12 minutes, no more. Arlen barely nodded. He traced lines of code, searching for what he had glimpsed before, a weakness, a thread that could be pulled without collapsing the whole weave. The transfer protocols had been designed for permanence, a brutal replacement but in their precision, the engineers had left no room for error. Every system carried a pressure point, and if pushed, it could unravel. His breath quickened. There, a single junction in the stabilization process where the mapped human mind fought against reptilian instinct. It was small, subtle, but it was real. If he amplified the instability, the system would falter. The consciousness could separate, maybe even return to a human vessel. "You can undo it," he whispered, though his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Mara Tess, emerald-scaled and sharp-eyed, typed quickly on the tablet. "Can it be done now?" "Not yet," Arlen said, shaking his head. "I need a way to anchor the human mind during separation. Without that, the consciousness drifts. It scatters." Luma leaned forward, her scales catching the console's glow. She tapped the side of his wristband, the one still flickering from its last reading. Biosignature mask. Could be anchor. Arlen froze. The thought struck with sudden force. The wristband, his crude device built to scramble vitals, a trick to survive the hunters. Worked by looping data, by holding signals steady in false patterns. If modified, it might serve as a lifeline for a mind pulled free from its host. His hands flew across the console, merging stolen research with his own designs. He stripped the wristband software to its skeleton, rewiring its purpose. No longer a mask, but a tether, a thread for the living. "This could work," he muttered, adrenaline fighting exhaustion. It might not restore everyone at once, but it could save one. Prove it's possible. Dust rained from above as the mountain shuddered. Dragons hissed low, wings spreading, claws scraping against stone. Nico barked a warning in his gravel-rough voice, only half human in tone. Arlen kept going. He rewrote the code, each line a gamble. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to continue. Every keystroke was an act of defiance. Every adjustment, a refusal to let Neurodyne define the future. At last, the device pulsed with new light. Arlen slipped it from his wrist, holding it out. "It's ready, but it needs a subject." The chamber fell silent. The dragons exchanged looks, heavy with meaning. Then, Luma stepped forward. She lowered her head, her eyes calm, and tapped the console with her claw. "Test me." "No," Arlen said quickly. "You're the one who found me. You brought me here. If it fails, I lose everything." Luma tilted her head, her breath steaming in the cold air. Then she tapped again, slower this time. "Better me than none." Arlen's throat tightened. He knew she was right. If the thread worked, it could change everything. If it failed, she would vanish into silence, another name lost to Neurodyne's cruelty. With shaking hands, he fixed the device to the base of her scaled neck, where the implant pulsed faintly beneath. Luma's gaze held his steady. There was no fear in her eyes, only trust. The program initiated. Light bled from the device, threads of energy weaving through the cavern like veins of fire. Luma convulsed, wings flaring, her body caught between instinct and memory. Arlen's console screamed warnings, data spilling faster than he could follow. "Hold on," he whispered. "Just hold on." The tether strained, stretching across the impossible divide between what she had been and what she had become. The dragons gathered closer, their eyes wide with desperate hope. Then suddenly, the readings leveled. The thread held. Luma's body slumped, breath shallow but steady, her eyes fluttering closed. Arlen's wristband glowed bright, showing two signals bound together, one reptilian, one human. It wasn't full freedom, not yet, but it was proof. Arlen sagged against the console, chest heaving. "It works," he breathed. "She's alive. She's both." The dragons erupted in low roars, a sound of triumph echoing through the cavern, even as the tunnels thundered with the approach of hunters. The sanctuary blazed with new fire. Arlen looked at Luma, lying still but breathing, her form cradled by both worlds. She was the first thread, the first step toward reclaiming what had been stolen. He straightened, exhaustion burning away under the weight of what they had achieved. "We can save you," he told them, his voice stronger now. "All of you. We can save humanity too, but we'll need to fight for it." The cavern shook again, this time with the sharp crack of breaching charges. Stone split, air filled with dust. Shadows with rifles and machines would soon flood the chamber. Arlen tightened the straps on his pack and stepped away from the console. "Let them come," he said, more to himself than anyone. "We finally have a weapon." The dragons spread their wings, eyes blazing. And in that moment, the hunted became something more. The guardians of a fragile thread, carrying the living into a future no corporation could control. The mountain shook, as though the earth itself resisted what was about to happen. Arlen Cade stood in the center of the cavern, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on the makeshift console glowing with pale blue light. Beyond the fractured stone walls, hunters advanced with relentless precision, their machines echoing like drums of war. Yet here, in the heart of the resistance, something more powerful than weapons was stirring. Dragons of every shade filled the chamber, their scales catching the cold light in flashes of emerald, silver, and fire red. They had once been human, scientists, guards, dreamers, and their voices had been stolen by Neurodyne's cruel designs. But tonight, the silence broke in other ways. Their breath steamed in the air, their claws scraped stone, and their eyes all turned toward Arlen, waiting for his next move. Luma lay nearby, her chest rising slowly, her body balanced between two worlds. She was proof the thread for the living worked, proof that humanity and dragonhood could exist together without breaking apart. Every dragon in that chamber had seen it. Hope had become real, and hope demanded a cost. The hunters breached the first layer of defenses. Explosions thundered in the tunnels, dust rolling into the cavern like smoke from a fire. Nico, silver-scaled and fierce, growled low, ready to fight with tooth and claw. Marites moved to his side, her emerald wings half spread, preparing to block the narrow entrance. But Arlen raised his hand. "Not just with strength," he said, his voice carrying against the stone. "They have more soldiers than we can fight. If we try to meet them blow for blow, we will lose. But there is something they cannot stop. The echo." The dragons stilled, confusion rippling through them. Arlen pointed at the console, the wristband tether still glowing faintly. "Neurodyne used your minds like blueprints, turning you into shadows of yourselves. But the truth is still inside you. Fragments of who you were. Memories that resist their control. Those fragments are echoes. And tonight, the echoes will choose." A tremor of unease passed through the chamber. Michael, black-scaled with silver stripes along his back, stepped forward. His claws tapped against the floor as he typed into the tablet. "Explain." Arlen's fingers flew across the console. "Every human mind leaves an imprint. Neurodyne thought they buried it beneath instinct, beneath loyalty programming. But they failed. I've seen it in Luma. I've seen it in you. What they called flaws, I call freedom. If I amplify those echoes, each of you must choose. Hold on to them, or let them fade forever." Silence followed his words. The dragons glanced at one another, their massive forms trembling slightly with the weight of the choice. Outside, the hunters drew closer. Sparks of gunfire flashed in the tunnels. Arlen looked to Luma. Though weak, she opened her eyes, and for a moment he saw both the dragon and the woman she had once been. She nodded faintly. That was enough. "Then it's time," Barlin said. He adjusted the console, his hands steady despite the roar of his own pulse. "But know this, it won't be easy. The echoes will hurt. They will pull you through every memory Neurodyne tried to erase. If you hold, you live as more than what they made you. If you falter, the echo dies, and so does your chance." Nico's silver head lowered, his voice a rumble deeper than stone. "Better to hurt than to be empty." The dragons drew closer, forming a circle around the console. Arlen activated the protocol. Light rippled out like a wave, weaving through the cavern, threading into every implant, every altered mind. The air shimmered. The dragons convulsed. Each one released a sound, caught between a roar and a cry. Their wings flared, tails lashing, eyes burning as if set alight from within. Memories surged. They remembered families left behind, work stolen, laughter smothered by sterile laboratories. They remembered the faces of friends declared dead after so-called accidents. And deeper still, They remembered themselves, who they had been before the transfer. Some fell silent, their echoes too faint, too fractured. Their bodies stilled, their eyes dimmed, and the choice was made. But others roared louder, their cries shattering the cavern air. Echoes clung to them, grew stronger, and merged with the dragon forms that Neurodyne had forced upon them. Arlen staggered as the energy pushed back through the console. The tether nearly burned his hands, but he held on. He had promised them choice, and he would not fail now. The mountain shook again, this time from more than hunters. The roar of dozens of voices, human and dragon, at once, burst outward, a resonance so strong it cracked stone. Hunters stormed through the tunnel, but they faltered. The sound tore through their machines, ripping signals apart, breaking their weapons before they could fire. Dragons surged forward, no longer silent shadows, but beings reborn with the weight of memory. Claws met steel, wings beat air heavy with dust, and the echoes struck harder than any weapon. Arlen watched as the cavern became a battlefield of light and shadow. Dragons fought, not as programmed beasts, but as people who had chosen to reclaim themselves. Each echo that held became a force of its own, guiding strikes, protecting allies, burning through the dark. He turned back to Luma. She lay still, her body trembling, but her eyes glowed with twin fires, one human, one dragon. "You chose," he whispered. "You came back." Her voice did not emerge in words, but in feeling. Gratitude, fierce and undeniable. The hunters broke, their formation shattered by the storm they could not understand. They fled into the tunnels, leaving weapons and machines abandoned in the dust. When silence finally fell, it was not empty. It was full of breath, full of life, full of echoes that had chosen to endure. Arlen stood among them, exhausted but unbroken. He knew Neurodyne would return, stronger and hungrier than before. But tonight, something had shifted. Tonight, they had proven the company's lie could be undone. As dawn touched the ridge above the mountain, light filtering through cracks in the stone, the dragons gathered around Arlen. They were no longer just survivors. They were guardians of their own fate. The day the echoes chose was not the end. It was the beginning of a future where memory itself had power, and where even the smallest fragment of humanity could rise against the darkness.